Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. We have a global audience for this webinar, so welcome from whichever time zone, whichever city you're joining from. And I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us for the next 90 minutes. My name is Eric Rosand. I'm the Executive Director of the Strong Cities Network, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our latest in our series of webinars on global crises, local impacts. We gather at a critical moment for cities and communities worldwide. The increasing complexities and cascading impacts of global crises, whether conflicts, displacement, or social and political polarization, continue to shape local realities and in many cities erode social cohesion and threaten public safety. The Israel-Gaza crisis in particular has deeply affected cities around the world, heightening tensions, amplifying divisions, and in many cases, making meaningful dialogue more difficult than ever before. So, this month's discussion on restarting dialogue is not just timely, it is urgent. It is also a topic on which cities across our global network have asked for support repeatedly. Local leaders, city officials, city council members, and community organizations are grappling with how to bridge divides that at present may feel impossible. The fear, anger, and grief surrounding this conflict are real and cannot be ignored. But as we have seen time and again, cities are not just where local impacts of global crises are experienced, but they're places where solutions can be found, where diverse communities can come together, where trust can be rebuilt, and where dialogue can be restarted. So today we'll be exploring how local leaders and local governments can support these processes. And we are honored, deeply honored, to be joined by two remarkable peacemakers, Aziz Abu Sarah and Maoz Inon, who will share their own experiences of loss, advocacy, and dialogue. They are prominent voices for reconciliation and peace and have inspired audiences around the world. And we are so delighted to have them with us today. So first, they'll share their remarkable stories, and then I'll be discussing with Aziz and Maoz how cities can restart dialogue, drawing on some of the practical steps cities can take and lessons they can draw from. We'll then explore some hard questions, including how to move past red lines that prevent conversations from even beginning, and how city leaders can support dialogue while ensuring they're not seen as taking sides in this conflict. We will then open the floor for audience questions. So please get those ready, type your question.
We lost Eric, Aziz, so maybe we can start.
I want to thank all of you for being here and engaging in what might be a difficult but necessary conversation. Dialogue is often not easy, but it's always necessary, and it's how we can move forward together. So with that, let's begin. And Aziz, Maoz, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for everyone joining this webinar. Both Aziz and I are excited and thrilled to be with you today. We see many familiar faces and friends here on the screen. Hi, Benedetto. So it's really great to be here with you. Usually, we start with a hug. Though that Aziz is a Palestinian and I'm Israeli, it doesn't mean we are not friends and partners. So it's difficult to share a hug on the screen, but Aziz, this is a hug for you. And we'll start in 15 minutes by sharing our story, and then we'll move forward with the agenda. My name is Maoz Inon. I was born and raised in Israel. And on October 7th, I lost my parents, and I lost many of my childhood friends and their parents or their kids that were killed or kidnapped to Gaza. And my parents were among the first victims of the Hamas attack. We lived in a small community just bordering with Gaza, and it was 7:45. on Saturday morning that we lost contact with them, and we tried to reach them and their neighbors and other people from the community, and we weren't able to reach anyone till the afternoon when we learned that our parents' house is burned to ashes and that there are two bodies inside. We are five siblings. I have two elder sisters, one younger sister and brother. And then I started my journey. I started my journey and speaking worldwide, and of course in Israel. And at the beginning, I used to start by saying that nothing could prepare me or any of you listening now, nothing can prepare you for such a loss and tragedy. And then as the weeks passed from October 7th, I realized that I was prepared. I was prepared for losing my parents, and it was my parents that prepared me. I was born in a kibbutz, in a small farming community, but I will start maybe with the Shiva. I will go back to the Shiva. Shiva is the Jewish way of mourning, which we started on October the 8th, when hundreds of people came every day to condolence us and to be with us, cry and hug us. And on the second day of the Shiva, only 2 days after October 7th, my young brother asked the family to share a universal message that we, the children of Yacobi and Bila Inon, are not seeking revenge. We don't want the revenge, the death of our parents. We've been living in a cycle, in a trap that has been going on for a century of revenge, bloodshed, fear and hate, and by revenging their death, we're just gonna escalate this cycle. And we want to stop it, to break the cycle and start a new path. And that same night, I had a dream. And I was crying in bed, and in my dream, I could see the entire humanity. I could see any one of you here in the webinar. And we were all crying. We were all crying, and our tears went down our face to our bodies, and our bodies were wounded, burned, crushed from the war. And we cried and cried, and our tears washed, cleaned, and cured our bodies. They cured our wounds, and we become whole and healthy again. And we kept crying and crying, and our tears went down to the ground. And the ground was soaked with blood. You could not see grass or flower, you could see only blood. And then our tears start washing the blood from the earth, purifying the land. And then I could see a path. I could see a path on the beautiful land. I could see the path to peace and reconciliation. And I woke up from this dream only 3 days after losing my parents. And I have decided, in order to cure myself, because for 3 days and 3 nights, I was literally drowning in an ocean of sorrow and pain. My body was broken into thousands of pieces, and I decided that in order to cure and heal myself, I might choose this path. And on the morning, it was 3 days after October 7th, I woke up for another day of the Shiva, and then I saw a message in my Facebook, a message from Aziz. And Aziz and I met only 10 years ago for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and we weren't in touch, but we were Facebook friends. And Aziz sent me a message of condolences that he's standing with me and with my family. And then I realized that yes, I lost my parents, but I want a friend, I want a brother, and I want a partner. So Aziz, this 16 months that you've been walking next to me, hand in hand, and your support and the knowledge you've been sharing with me helped me to be transformed and to do the hard work we are both doing now, which is dialogue, which is building the path to peace and reconciliation.
Thank you, Maoz. Thank you, everyone. Hello, and just like Maoz said, we are both excited to be here with you because the work you are doing is very important and it fits very well with our mission as well and the work that both Maoz and I are doing. And so thank you for inviting us, and thank you all for showing up today. Maoz ended the last few words with how we both have become friends, have become brothers, and I think it's in some way normal as two people who've lost family members, Maoz, his parents, and in my case, my brother, that we understood and understand each other very well. We understand each other pain in some ways better than many or most people around the world, and that even people among our own communities. I lost my brother when I was 10 years old. He was 18, he was 19 years old at the time. He spent a year before that in Israeli prison on allegation of throwing rocks at Israeli cars. And when Taysir was killed, I was not in the same place where Maoz is. I was only 10 years old, and the idea of forgiveness or the idea of feeling prepared, I definitely wasn't prepared. When you're 10 years old and somebody kills your brother, you are angry and you seek revenge. And that's exactly how I felt. And for the next 8 years, that's where I went. I was looking for that revenge. And it took me 8 years to find the same path that Maoz is talking about, the path of working together, of dialogue, but also the path of seeking an end to this reality where people continue to die. And unfortunately, it's been way too long, and it continues to happen. And in some ways, not only continues to happen in the sense of far away, Maoz mentioned his parents, but also friends, also neighbors, and that's true in my case as well. My dad has lost multiple cousins. Different people in my family, including children, have been killed. And then in Gaza, pretty much every friend I have has lost family member. And in the reality of today conversations, whether you look in social media or whether you look in cities where you are, our experience is what is used often to justify so much hate and to perpetrate so much and keep this reality going on, to help almost justify more and more death, more and more pain, and more division, and using stories exactly like mine, like Maoz's, like many of our friends. And so for us, it's extremely important that we raise our voices and we say, here is why we are taking a different path, and here's why we need you to be part of this conversation to help us achieve an end to all that killing and an end to the conflict, and achieving an equitable and sustainable peace in not only in Israel and Palestine, but in our region as a whole. And so this is our focus, isn't only to really have a conversation and dialogue. The end goal of what Maoz and I are doing isn't dialogue. That's the first step. But the end goal is actual peace, because without it, we can talk to each other forever. And if there's no peace, there's no point. In some ways, what are we doing? Our endpoint is to stop the reality that we are living in. Our endpoint is to make sure that we help each other, not hurt each other. And we often talk about how when people look at us, I'm kind of circling around to where Maoz started, of how we start with a hug. And so we tell people often, when you look at us, very often communities wants to divide us into Israeli versus Palestinian, Arab versus a Jew, and so on. All these Muslim, Jewish, Arab, Israeli, whatever, all these kind of divisions. And what we ask people to do is not to divide us in that way. That if division is required, that division must be those of us who stand for equality, who stand for justice, who stands for peace, who stand for reconciliation, who stand for recognition, and those who don't yet. And a lot of our work is reaching out to those who are with us and those who might need encouragement, and to those who are not there with us yet. And so I hope this is part of this conversation that we are having.
Yeah, thank you, Aziz. And I want to share two stories about my parents and how they prepared me for the moment of their death. And also why it's so important. I will start why it's so important for us to speak to you. Because Aziz and I, in the last 16 months, I think we've been to nearly 20 cities around the world. And we've witnessed in firsthand that you importing the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, to your communities, to your universities, to your cities. This is the reality. You are aware as much as we do. And while the national politics using fear, hate, and division to get power and to be elected, they leave the cleanup to you, to the cities. You need to handle with the mess that they created for your people and in your cities and your communities. And we are here reaching out to you that we want to be partners. We want together that you will help us solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and then you will be able to import the solution, because the solution is the same solution, like Eric said before. It starts with dialogue and with recognition and with working together in order to have better life, not just in Israel and Palestine, but throughout the Strong City Network and beyond. So this is why our conversation is crucial for us as individual, for us as people, and I think for your cities and for the greatest humanity. And my father, he was a farmer. He was a really amazing farmer. And for 60 years, he was sowing wheat. And each season, he would share with us how devastating the situation in the field is. In the Israeli farming, we have drought and floods and insects and heat waves and cold wave. And all the time, my father would share how devastating the situation is. But at the same sentence, he would also say that next year we will sow wheat again, because next year will be a better year. He has the agency to change the future, even if not to predict it. He will need to learn from his mistakes. He will need to consult with other farmers to get the best seeds, to fertile the land, and to sow with great faith that next year will be better. And now I realize that it's now our turn to sow. And there are three seeds we encourage you to sow with us: the seeds of hope, the seeds of the future, and the seeds of forgiveness. Hope is an action. It's not something we can lose or find or someone else will give you. Hope is a series of action we are creating together by envisioning a better future and acting to make it into reality. And each one of you in your cities, in your communities, can harness the people, can channel sometimes the fear, the hate, and the trauma into creation of hope, because it's a huge energy that is there in the streets. And if we'll use it to generate hope, to generate a better future, we can change the world. So this is how we sow hope. Future and is where we meet. Israelis and Palestinians, but the whole humanity. Even though that our stories now are so far away from each other. And just earlier this week, I had a webinar with Ukraine and Russia. It's exactly the same. The stories are so far away from each other. But our stories meet in the future. We meet in the future that is based on shared values of equality and dignity, shared acknowledgement and recognition, reconciliation and healing, security and safety. And if we'll be able to sow those seeds of the future, those values within our communities, within our cities, we're gonna inspire the entire humanity, the entire world, to go into that direction. And the seeds of forgiveness, and this is what I learned mostly from Aziz and another Palestinian friend and partner, Hamza Awaude, that we need to forgive for the past, we need to forgive for the present, if we want to be free, if we don't want to be slaves to those who harmed us, if we want to resource ourselves into a better future, we must forgive. but we cannot and will not forgive for the future. So we must resource ourselves into the future. And every time when we dialogue, so many times we won't reach a common ground regarding the past. There are two, three, many times multi-narratives regarding the past and the present. But we must find our common ground and shared values regarding the future. And then as leaders, we need to take our communities, our people, our cities to this future. And this is exactly the kind of work Aziz and I are doing on the ground here in Palestine and Israel. And we want to build an international coalition of cities, of communities, of faith leaders that will work together in order to make the world a better place.
Perhaps the best way to end our introduction is to tell you a little bit about some of that work Maoz and I have been doing. We like you mentioned, we are working both in Israel and Palestine and internationally, and going from one place to another, building coalition. And this is one of our main thing, doing it in Israel and Palestine and doing it internationally, being part and leaders in the It's Time Coalition, which brings 60 organizations right now together in Israel and Palestine, working together on really building a movement, not just building an organization, and starting from the ground up again and again, to trying to show that there are more people that are speaking our language than we even know, or that we are seeing on television, we are seeing in the media. And so both Maoz and I are very involved in building that coalition locally. We are both leaders of an organization that we co-direct called Interact, which is also doing a lot of work. While we saying we can't agree often, or we don't agree often on the past or the present, it is important to learn about the past and the present and to understand each other and hopefully have empathy, even if we don't fully agree, especially in times today where it's becoming people feeling, at least in some national politics, that empathy is a weakness. We are speaking a lot about the power of empathy, learning about each other. And we created, for example, a project where we are creating content for people to learn about each other history. We're creating a dual narrative center that is creating that content. We are building also coalitions across other countries. We've been to Italy. That's where we met Benedetto to meet with Pope Francis. And in our meeting with Pope Francis, we asked his help when he went to the G7 meeting to bring the ideas and the thinking and the support that we need to the G7 leaders. And he did exactly that. And so those are the type of coalitions we are creating. In May this year, we are planning on having the biggest peace gathering in Jerusalem in maybe 20 years, if not more, and hoping for over 10,000 people to join, and working with many places around the world to join us in this gathering, and perhaps to hold similar gatherings in cities around the world, and for people to come and also join us in Jerusalem, and hoping some of you might be willing to do that. And so these are just giving you a little bit of touches. Now, it is important to just end with this. We not detached from reality. And I think it's obvious with two people who lost family members, we definitely not detached from reality. We not telling people even not to be angry. We're not coming to people and say, hey, you know, you need to act like nothing is going on. That's not realistic. And we know it more than anybody else. But what we are saying is there's so much anger right now. Let us use this anger in a way that is productive. Anger is like a nuclear power. And while it's better if we don't have maybe nuclear power, but if we do have it, you can use it in one or two ways. You either can use it to create a bomb and to destroy, or you can use it to create electricity and to create light. And so in the midst of so much suffering, we are trying to use our own pain, our own suffering, and our own anger to fuel it into a direction that makes this world a better place.
Thank you so much, Moaz and Aziz, for that. I mean, really, saying it's inspiring is really an understatement. I think it's humbling to be in this conversation with all of you. And I'm sure a number of folks on the line will have questions, but maybe we can just start off with a few from our end to keep the conversation going. And I think the two that sort of I want to just draw attention to in the beginning are somewhat potentially contradictory. One is, what can a mayor and a city leader do to sort of restart dialogue when dialogue has been ruptured, whether it's between Jewish community and Muslim community in a city, or between other communities around another issue? Like, what is the sort of the secret sauce for restarting dialogue from a perspective of a mayor or leader? And then the related question is, and this is more specific about October 7th, and what followed, is language. And how does one talk about these issues? And sort of how can one be sensitive to both sides, but still use terminology that is going to be
It's the right moment to freeze. It is a hard.
Maoz and Aziz, would you be able to answer the first question while we wait for Eric to rejoin?
Yeah, and we know what Eric's second question is too.
Exactly. Thank you.
Maoz, do you want to start, or
No,
do
you
you
can
want
start.
to?
No.
I can start. Okay, so I do want to give just 1 second of a background. I come from conflict resolution background. I worked at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. for a few years at the School of Conflict Analysis and Resolution. And so your first question is something I've dealt with, having worked in many conflict zones around the world, from Afghanistan to Syria to Colombia to many other places. And how do you come to a place where there's so much division, and what is it the role of somebody who has some kind of, I guess, power into bridging the gap, or power sometimes into making things worse? And I would say there are a few things that could be done. There are many things that could be done. I'll just mention a few, and if you want to know more, I'm sure I can mention more later. The first thing that comes to my mind in these kind of situations is, just like the general population is getting so much misinformation and so much disinformation, so are people in your own community. So the first thing to be done, I think, is empathy, is to show empathy as a leader to both communities. Not every meeting has to be with both communities together, definitely not in the beginning. I think it's very important that both communities are met individually in the beginning. But I would say one mistake often is done in those kind of situations. We look for the troublemakers. We look of we want to go and talk to, who are the ones who divide our communities. And in every community, there are ones who are loud and divisive. That's true in Israel and Palestine. That's true around the world. When I was working George Mason, we were working in Afghanistan, and one idea we came up with: what if we start looking for the bridge builders, for influencers within our communities, people who can really influence the situation in their own communities, Jews and Muslims in this case, in the States. Look for ones who have power, but also are not the ones who are just spreading divisiveness, but ones who might be more open to these conversations, and bring them in to be part of this conversation, and not just go for the ones who are being loud and the ones who are being divisive. And if that happens, those are going to be your best allies, and they the ones who will advise you. Because my assumption, most mayors in the cities you are working in, most municipalities, you're not experts in Israel and Palestine. And so you need somebody from those communities. You need people from those communities who are the do-gooders kind of people, do good, and people who have influence within that community, who can give you advice and can support you and can be part into helping build that strategy. And I found it's really hard to go to any city where you don't have those people. They're not necessarily the first on your radar because they're not the loudest, but they do exist.
Thank you. And Maoz, about the
Yeah.
language issue, just quick anecdote. We were in a city in the United States recently where I started off a conversation with some community-based organizations referring to the October 7th and post-October 7th environment as the Israel-Gaza crisis, and couldn't even get past that formulation before people were jumping down my throat about it's not a crisis, it's a war, it's not Gaza, it's Hamas. And you couldn't get past that to actually have a conversation about how it's impacting communities, et cetera. So terminology is obviously takes on a really added importance here. And how have you seen it play out in your work? And what advice do you have for city leaders in terms of how to frame this issue? What terms to use, what terms to avoid, et cetera?
Yes, Eric, so you use the word frame, how to frame, and that's a key for success. How to frame everything, every action, every word, and every news that is coming from our region, but later on from other. I will start by saying that we need to prevent this division and polarization. So now we're already beyond that point. But the best way to do is if beforehand we were creating a round table of faith leaders, of students leaders, of community leaders that we meet every 3 months, every year, that we build trust, that we build a relationship, that we build open network and communication line, that when something happens, we can take the phone and we know exactly who to call for. So it's a lot about preventing the division and then more than controlling it or try to manage it. So that's I would suggest to start working through that. And then it's the mayor and city leaders. First, they need to listen, just to listen. To listen to both sides' stories. They want to share their pain, their trauma, their suffering, and just to listen to them. And then to show that you care and learn about the situation and be very honest by telling. And we are also doing it many, many times. Even if we speak with each other, but then with communities, we don't have all the answers. We don't have enough knowledge to comment about some issues, but we are here to learn because we care. And we know that we can solve together, we can find a common ground. So it's a lot about honesty and about leadership and leading from a place of vulnerability, that we don't have all the answers yet, but together we'll find those answers. And that's when it goes to framing and wording. And we meet both sides, of course. We meet the pro-Israelis, then we meet the pro-Palestinians. And I usually say that both sides are right. People like to be in the right position and believe that they are right. So yes, you are right. By being right and winning the argument or the debate, we are losing our life. We are losing our life. And now it's time to support the peace movement, to support the reconciliation, to support the peacemaker, because we cannot bring justice, we cannot make justice concerning the past. There is no justice that can be made with Aziz's brother. We cannot bring him back to life. And it goes the same with my parents. But we can make justice for the future generation. And this justice, we won't be able to make it by bombs, by walls, by fear and hate. And we need to acknowledge that fear, seeking revenge, and being hateful are human behaviors. If we are seeking no revenge, it doesn't mean we are superior to anyone else. It just means we are all humans. But when we acknowledge and we start dealing with those calls, for example, for revenge, where are they coming from? And which stories we can take from our culture, faith that will reject revenge. All faith reject revenge. Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and definitely Buddhism and others. And so to start working with it, but not to, okay, someone is calling revenge, I will oppress him, I will silence him. It just will raise his volume and his power within his community. So to acknowledge that there are many feelings, some of them are very difficult and very tough, but we need to ventilize them. We cannot oppress them. We need to hear them. We need to listen. We need to show our empathy.
Thank you. And obviously, when communities are being impacted by what's going on in Israel and Gaza, often there's a tremendous amount of grief and trauma at the outset, and that may be inhibiting them from being able to sort of be at a place where they can sit down and dialogue with the other side, as it were. So what's that path from sort of that initial impact, that initial trauma, to being able to sort of be in a frame of mind where you can have that conversation with someone who may disagree or may have experienced the exact opposite kind of impact? Are there any steps along the way that cities or other local leaders can try to cultivate to help individuals along that path?
I think
Aziz or
our example gives a good setup for that. Reaching out to people is very, very powerful, and it makes people feel heard. It makes people feel seen, even if you don't know. You mentioned earlier what language I use. I sometimes tell people, there is no way I'm going to use a language that will make you happy. If you sitting in a room of Israelis and Palestinians, whatever word, Eric, you'd use, somebody's not going to be happy with it. And in some ways, that's and being honest and saying, I know there's no language that'll make anyone here super happy, but reaching out to people, hearing what they have to say, listening to their stories, I think that is the number one step. Most of us are desperate to be heard. And I try to push away from right away going into where the line's going to be and what's the future Palestinian state would look like, or what the future Israeli state, and how there's a place for those kind of conversations. It's not that we shouldn't have it. It's not the first conversation you have. The first conversation should be, what's going on with you? What are you feeling? What's your story? What connects you? Do you have family there? Is anybody in your family hurt? Those are the things that start the conversation and makes us able to see each other as a human being and not just as the other. And if you're talking to Muslim, to Jewish communities especially, but also, it's not fair to say Muslim and Jewish community, there are also Christians in the Holy Land, whichever community you're talking to that cares, just understanding why they care and what connects them to the place. There is a very powerful, one of the most well-known conflict resolution expert, Jean-Paul Ledrak, when he worked in Colombia, and there was a lot of feeling that nothing you can do can fix the conflict in Colombia. This is before the peace agreement there. And when he was asked, what do you do in these kind of situations? He said, I share stories. So what to do? Start a conversation about those stories like ours, stories of other peacemakers as well, and listening to those people's stories. I think that's the key of dialogue in general. It's not debate, and it's not arguing, and it's not who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, and it's also taking leadership, not to wait for the crisis to erupt, but okay, let's do a 1 day or 2 days dialogue. We'll invite peacemakers, not just Israelis and Palestinians. We can invite peacemakers from Colombia, from North Ireland, from Rwanda, and we'll do 2 days a seminar about bridging between communities, between division. So, and it will allow those the very hard feeling of anger, of revenge, of wanting to be right, about everything and each word. It will create a platform for ventilation and for knowledge learning. And we all need to be knowledgeable about what's happening in Israel and Palestine. But again, what divide our communities? What make the distance between us so big?
And have you seen Go ahead.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
Maoz and I feed on each other, so forgive us for. But just as Maoz speaking, it reminded me of a couple of things I think really essential. One, I find a lot of times, and fully understandable, if you in a city, if you bring Israelis and Palestinians, there's a lot of risk that that meeting is not going to go well. And one thing helpful is sometimes to do what just Maoz said, is to have a third party involved. And that gives you a little, you set up the event, but you have other people involved in the mediation, in the conversation. And sometimes those people can come from abroad, like Maoz mentioned, Colombia or Rwanda, but sometimes in our own cities, there are the best experts in these topics. There are mediators in every city that we live in, and having them getting involved and be part of that conversation and perhaps mediating, because it's a tough topic, and having someone who has experience in how to handle those kind of conversations is important. I would say that mediators don't always also have to be a third party. Sometimes the best mediation is people who are involved in it. Having a Jew and a Muslim or a Palestinian background and an Israeli background person or something like that, being together, able to mediate one of those conversations is one of the most successful. The reason the two of us have been able to go so many places together, because we use that in conflict resolution, it's a terminology called insider mediation. We use insider mediation. We come in and we say, like Maoz said, we don't agree on everything. We don't agree on fully the past. We don't agree on fully the present, but we're trying to make sure that the future is better. That's where our conversation mainly is. But because we are an Israeli and a Palestinian, people are willing to engage sometimes with what we say more. And we say we're not fully balanced, I guess, if that's the right word. Like, obviously, we all have biases, and we're honest about some of those biases as well. So that insider mediation is extremely, extremely powerful in those situations, and it gives the city a step removed. So if the two of us or whoever you bring do or say something wrong, you're still one step removed, which gives you a little bit of protection.
One of the things that we've seen really influencing, in some cases, catalyzing some of the divisiveness is are the conspiracy narratives, the disinformation about the misinformation about the conflict, about the history of the conflict. How have you navigated that in your sort of mediation efforts, in your dialogue, in your attempts to restart dialogue, when maybe one side of the divide is so influenced by distorted facts about the conflict, for example? How do you sort of, as a neutral mediator, come in and level set the environment in terms of sort of the facts, as it were?
So it's also, we're not going to agree, like we said, we're not going to agree on the facts of the past. It's two different facts. And we're not going to agree about the facts of the present. And we need to acknowledge that. And there is no point in debating, because we won't be able to reach a common ground. So just to put it out there. So each side can share his own story and his own facts. And if there is, it's been done through a very through a moderating and balanced way, we can share our narrative regarding the past, which is exactly what Aziz and I are doing. And we can overcome a Palestinian Israeli bereaved families, we can overcome over our loss. We can overcome over seeking revenge and being hateful and fearful from each other. So can do you. Can do you in your cities. if we can do it, you can do it too. So we model them how the future can look like and how relationship can be built even from those who it sounds unimaginable that we become brothers. And we're saying that we are brothers not in just to please anyone. We we feel it. We feel it. So
I, I'll
Aziz, do you want
just
to
add, yeah, I'll just add that one of the things we've done and we found really helpful I tell people, don't get your facts from social media, from influencers, from that especially in the States. I think it's really important to mention that. That's not where you're gonna get facts about what's going on right now, not in Gaza, not in the West Bank, not in Israel. There's better ways to get your information than just social media, where depends on what your views is. You find somebody who supports those views, somebody who's not even there, not an Israeli or a Palestinian in most cases, who are spewing all kind of crazy stuff, and that's what brings a lot of division in America between those communities. But I would also say one thing I found when people cannot hear the story of the other, you need to personalize it. And so instead of talking, even today, when we talk about how many people are killed in Gaza or how many people were killed on October 7th, numbers don't move people. It's the stories of the individuals. And so you can argue against a conspiracy theory, but it's a story of someone that really makes them moved. And so we go back to the story. I posted in the chat one of the efforts we work on to deal with that. And this is a project we created. It's called dualnarrative.org, where we have collected people's stories and people perception of the past. And we try to have it in a way that is a dialogue, that's not antagonistic, that's not attacking, but rather really explaining. And so we go through different stories and different events in the past from 1948, 1967, different topics that are not necessarily a date. And we also working on different narratives of what the future would look like. And so this is a project that's under development right now, but it's an example of how we able to deal with it. Is those are the voices we're bringing as we talk into communities who are having a hard time hearing one side or another.
This is a question from the audience, and I think it follows from what we were just talking about. Is obviously in the U.S., a number of universities have been convulsed by the aftermath of October 7th. Often protests by people who are thousands of miles physically removed from the conflict itself. And so what's your perspective on all this, and what do you think the reasons are for all of this agitation, when two people like yourselves are able to sit down and dialogue, and at these universities there's so much tension and disruption around these issues? What's the reason for this, you think, and how can your approach help de-escalate here on these campuses?
Aziz?
Yeah, our experience has been very different. We've been on many campuses, and I think it depends on how some of these campuses have led with it. Campuses are a place of a lot of passion. There's young people, they want to do something, they want to be involved. And one of the worst things you can do in a campus is to tell young people, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, you don't get it, you're 18-year-old, go back and study, that's your role. And too many campuses did exactly that. And the moment you tell an 18, 19-year-old, if any of you are parents, you know that, you tell a teenager, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're doing, sit back and do nothing, they'll do exactly the opposite of that, and it'll get them even more and more upset. So what we've done in many of those campuses is talk about how the students there can engage and how they can do something and how they can help create a change rather than telling them don't do anything. And this touches perhaps on one of the other questions I see in the chat about imbalance. We do recognize imbalance. We do recognize imbalance of power. We do recognize in the United States a conversation, the government has very strong stand as supporting one side rather the other. These are conversations we should be able to talk about it. We can't ignore it. And then talk about how those kind of stands, being pro-Israel or being pro-Palestine for that matter, while people are arguing being pro this or that, we are the ones paying the price for it. And helping students recognize that is important. Now, I'll give you an example or two of campuses we engaged with. We worked with one campus where the students who wanted to protest were working on their signage, and they're going to go out on a protest. And we talked to them about what kind of signage they're going to have and how do they know if these are students, some of them who really haven't had any, they might fall for some tropes that could be interpreted in a hateful way. And so the conversation led to them realizing we need to engage with the Jewish students on campus and talk to them about the signage that we are having. And so they ended up reaching out to the Jewish students who don't even agree with them on the topic of the protest. And in this case, it was people who were pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza. And the students who they reached out to, they said, look, we want to show you the messages we're going to put out, and we would like you to help us figure out if any of these messages are anti-Semitic tropes. And that reaching out ended up changing the whole conversation between the two groups of students. So this is often what's missing. We go right away into confrontation instead of creating a space where not telling the students, no, don't go out to protest, but rather finding a place for them to communicate. Now, it doesn't, again, I'm not saying it's going to work everywhere and it's going to go perfect everywhere, but it works more often than not. And it's not employed more often than not, unfortunately.
Thank you, Aziz. I also say that many universities have a conflict resolution department or faculty. And many times when we are being approached by universities, we ask them, do you have a conflict resolution department? Did you ask for their advice? Because sometimes the best experts are already there in the campus. And it can be a great exercise for the students and for the professors to actually act, not to solve conflicts that are in faraway places, but solve conflicts that are within their universities or within their cities. And we were amazed to get so many surprises reaction. Yes, it's a great idea. How come we haven't thought about it? And if the university doesn't have a conflict resolution a faculty, maybe another university in town, and then to create a round table for university leaders, students leaders, faith leaders, municipality elected, and come together and start building a common ground, a charter for the city. And this charter can take the city to a really a new horizon. And so,
Yeah.
so to use this conflict as a potential. And this is exactly what we learned from Pope Francis, which gave an amazing and profound teaching and preaching when we met him in Arena de Pace. He told us and the 12,000 peacebuilders that were in the arena that when there is a conflict, we must embrace it. We must recognize it and start working with it. Because in a place when there is no conflict, it means there is an oppression, a dictatorship. And that human beings are the only creature on planet Earth that can solve a conflict through a dialogue. And when we are achieving this solution, we evolve. So not to shout away or build a wall between us to the conflict, but to embrace it, to learn and rise from the conflict. It can be a great opportunity.
One sort of reaction to that is that while there are many conflict resolution courses on college campuses, they're electives, not required. And so how do you get those that are sort of fomenting conflict to be sort of brought into the conflict resolution space. And I think that's one of the challenges in cities and in university environments is that the
Right.
peace builders are building peace, but those that are fomenting conflict are not necessarily wanting to be in the same sort of arena as the peace builders.
Eric, I think this is brilliant question because I worked in one of those conflict resolution programs at the university. And I think one thing as a country we need to go through a change, and cities and so on, is learning how to deal with conflicts and how to dialogue and how to solve conflicts, not just in Israel and Palestine, in general, is something that needs to be much more taught in every school, not only in college, every high school, every middle school. How do we deal with bullying? It's a conversation that, we teach math, we teach English, we teach science. We also need to teach how do you deal when you have a disagreement? How do we deal when we have an international conflict that we are involved in as a country and as individuals? But I think what Maoz was mentioning isn't just how do we get the students to attend more those elective classes you're talking about, or the students who choose to go and get a degree in conflict resolution, but that some of the best experts that could help a university, that can help a city, that can help a community, are in our own cities. I'll give you an example. Columbia University, it's one that has been in the headlines as recently as today. Columbia University has one of the most well-known conflict resolution programs in the country, maybe in the world. It has some of the best scholars and practitioners on conflict resolution in the world, people who I consider mentors, people who I studied what they teach and what they come up with. And I reach out to some of those even a year before, surprisingly finding out, just like Maoz said, they weren't involved in dealing with what was happening in campus. And in some ways, that's a representation of the reality we live in government in general. When it comes to Israel and Palestine, people like us who do conflict resolution work are not invited to the negotiation table. In the same way, people who are experts in conflict resolutions in our own communities are not invited to the conversations that we are talking about it. Now, in some universities, they did. And I remember in Dortmund, right after when a lot of campuses had many problems and conflicts, the Jewish professors and the Middle East professors already had a good relationship, which they already have done work together, reached out to each other. And so when things started going out of hand, those professors came together and set up a program and set up events and invited students to come and talk to them. Hundreds of students would show up at each event to talk to them. And I was in touch with some professors there. And some of those students were angry. Some of those students had things they wanted to say, but they created an avenue for the students to do that. That didn't happen in many campuses. But when universities were able to use the talents they have locally in their own communities, it spared them so much conflict. Another school in, I can't remember which university, but they sat down and negotiated successfully with the students. And in some universities that those negotiations worked and others not. And I think a big part of why yes, why not, is who were involved in the negotiations and who of the faculty were involved in the negotiations, who maybe of the community that can have influence on the students were involved in that, of those negotiations, and the community, who would give legitimacy for that process. Those are questions we don't ask often enough. You will get somebody from the trustee's office in a university and a couple of students, and it will go nowhere because neither of them really had any help or any legitimacy to even make concessions to each other.
Thank you. Maoz, do you have anything to add to that before I go into it?
Maybe just that we should not be the extremists are also the loudest, and we need not to be afraid of reaching out to them and offer them a place around the table. Just by getting a place, they will lower. This is how we experience it. they will lower their voice, and they will feel that they are being heard. And if they are being heard by the leaders of the university or the city, it will make their voice becoming lower also in the street. So not to be afraid. Sometimes it's better just to have one-on-one. It's not need to be a public event. It can be in a closed room, with a closed door policy, or just in a very intimate discussion, but not to be afraid of reaching out to them, and also to listen to them. By listening also to the extremists, we're going to learn, we're going to be more knowledgeable and be educated, and we can start dialogue with their fears, with their trauma, and with their anger.
Well, I was going to ask a question about how to, on the one hand, we're talking about a historic conflict that's been on the front pages of newspapers for many, many years, and we're looking at how to apply some of those lessons to very sort of localized divisions in cities. But it seems like when you're talking about lessons learned and practices, it's pretty obvious how they translate, and that a lot of this dialoguing, a lot of this conflict resolution is equally applicable to something as complex and longstanding as the Israel-Palestinian question crisis as it is to a very localized conflict in a city or in a community. But I did want to, so I'll skip that question, but I did want to ask a question about the issue of politicians and at the national level who might be fomenting or putting their finger on the side of one, on the scale in favor of one side or the other, and how that cascades down to the local level, and what a local leader who's trying to do exactly what you're describing they should be doing can sort of mitigate that impact. How can they insulate their community or their city from the political rhetoric that is being espoused at the higher level of government?
Okay, Aziz, if you won't mind, I would start, but I would start that we are not going to give you the perfect answer in this webinar. I think it's a very good question and topic that together we need to brainstorm about it and to really invest effort and resources in finding the best answer. And I think strong city network is one of the answers. That I know for sure. When you are able to coalesce together, you are becoming much more powerful. You share knowledge between you, and you can leverage on national politician when you are coming as a group. So it's like a group of exactly like a strong city network. I think it can be one of the key solutions for the world that we want to see for ourselves and for our children. And how we can coalesce together to share our values, and then we can stand very firmly against those politicians that thrive over polarization, division, and hate.
Aziz, anything to add? Yeah.
I think there's a strong part about the one, you want to try to solve some of those issues before it gets to national issue. Like New York, the moment members of Congress and Speaker of the House and so on got to New York, and it already was almost too late. But I think the other solution to it, it's all around legitimacy. You need to have people who have a strong legitimacy on our side of speaking truth and speaking about peace and speaking about bringing people together, but somebody who also people would respect. And those might be local faith leaders, those might be local professors, those might be community leaders, those might be local politicians that have the respect of the community, and sometimes have the respect of the community much more than somebody who's in Washington and is disconnected to at least to some point from that community. when one of the communities we visited, Maoz and I, we had a gathering with some of the faith leaders. And it was a beautiful gathering, mainly because those are people who agree with each other on 95% probably of stuff. It wasn't only Jewish and Muslim, there were also Christians. But they also realized the small misconceptions they had that made them separated and not be able to work together. And those small misconceptions were things like, oh, we invited the imam to come to a couple of events and he never showed up, so we assumed he's not interested. Come to find out, the imam just has a huge community, but he's the only imam there, and he's dealing with weddings and funerals and community and problems and everything happening in Gaza and so on, and didn't have the time. And so that community said, you know what? The imam isn't the only one who represents the community. It's not like maybe in some other groups, but there's a board that really wants to be involved. Can you get them more to meet with you? Would you be willing to invite them instead to come to these gatherings? And stuff like that, that together, after that meeting, you can look and see suddenly people who had no connections and would create a coalition that would support those local politicians in these efforts. You know, you wouldn't have been able to do it without this communication and figuring out, why aren't we doing it yet? How can we come together? So those are some of the thoughts that come to my mind.
Go ahead, yeah.
If I can add another thing, also to use people of art and sport and different walks of life. Like if a local but famous music band can come and support dialogue, can be in the room, invite them to the room with the students leaders, with the faith leader students, with the municipality elected, bring those musicians, bring those artists. Also for the room, it will ease the conversation. It will make the atmosphere, it will set a different tone. And many times it's the setting, the framing. So be creative about the people that really are among our stakeholders that would love to step in and to be part of the solution. And how they can also support dialogue, support unification of the city, of the communities.
And this is a question from the audience. We spoke about sort of the challenges of relying on social media or the internet for the facts or the news around these issues. If not social media or the internet, then where should people who want to stay informed be turning to for information about this kind of divisive issue?
So I think there's 3 different areas to do with that. One, I would say, and Maoz and I, we need to make that list and send it. It'll take us 5 minutes to do it. Follow a lot of peacemakers who post about these things. Peacemakers aren't necessarily not connected to reality. So we post about things that happen. Many of us have posted last week and still posting this week about friends of ours who run a bookshop in Jerusalem and that has been raided by the police. So we write about these issues. And so we can make that list and send it to you of people we respect, ourselves, friends of ours, colleagues of ours. That would be a much more very important information that you would get from that community. And I think that's a community that should be followed by everybody, in my opinion. So that's one. I would say it is not bad idea to follow some journalists from both sides who might have a bias, but not kind of conspiracy level bias. Everyone obviously have some kind of bias. And so again, there are people we would be happy to suggest. I think actually the dualnarrative.org might have some of those people already. We might have a few names there that people can follow, and they're not, again, balanced, but they are people who would bring you both Israeli perspective and Palestinian perspective, so you can hear what's going on from or what the people reading, Israelis and Palestinians, it will help you realize it's almost like different country, different news. So that would be the second part. And the
Do
third,
you think this is something Uh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry. No, please, sorry.
And the third, I think there are a couple of media outlets, local media outlets that are not famous in the West that, I like personally to follow. Again, they not balanced necessarily, but I think they report things that other media outlets might not report in the West. So follow stuff from Israel and Palestine, not only stuff that are international.
But
And
if I
go
can
ahead.
just add, like someone wrote in the chat that it's a very good question. And because it's such a good question, it's not related just to Israel-Palestine conflict, and it's about climate change, it's about economic crisis and others, that you, as Strong City Network, need to really resource yourself how to answer this question, and then to see how you can be part of the solution. But it's not something that now during this webinar of 90 minutes, but this is exactly why we feel privileged and honored to be with you today, because the entire humanity, all cities around the world are dealing exactly with those questions. And cities can be the solution.
And so a question here then in terms of this resourcing, do you think it would be helpful for local governments or city councils to be pushing out this kind of links to these kinds of quote unquote trusted, reliable sources, whether it's on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or on any other issue that's dividing communities in their city, to be sort of a conduit for that kind of trusted information? Do you think that's something a city should think about trying to do, or is that too fraught for a city to do?
Yeah, I think cities should be, you should take leadership. When there is no leadership on the national level, you need to take this leadership, and that's what I believe many of your residents are expecting it for you to take. And then if you will share on your social media of the city's official social media, you will share resources after you checked and prove them, that will give legitimacy to those channels and media outlets and influencers to keep doing the work they are doing and to partner with them.
One other question that I have that's all this is triggered is, we talk about bringing, having these conversations, restarting dialogue. What's the best place for this? Like in a city, what are good venues? What are good spaces for, safe spaces for these kinds of conversations to be restarted or to be furthered? What's going to be the most conducive to this kind of conversation? Classroom?
I think it depends what's your
library?
goal. It depends what's your goal. We try to think of also what's the most impact we can have. So Maoz and I have, when we traveling, for example, we try to think where is the impact. And I started with, I think you want to look at people who have influence in the communities, faith leaders, educators, community leaders, community organizers. I would say these are the first people you want to reach out to and get involved in these kind of conversations. And then, yeah, I think then it would spread to others, to students, to the actual people who are attending these services, the churches, synagogues, mosques, so on. But it starts, in my opinion, starts with who can you influence that might take this conversation and bring it to 1,000 people, to 5,000 people in their own community. And those would be the first people I would reach out to, especially when they are not ones involved in the conversation right now. And I think many, many of those would be easily allies in this conversation, just nobody has reached out to them yet.
And we have a great question and even an invitation in the chat for this Olympia in the state of Washington in the United States, they're supporting kids and youth as well as parents in schools and building skills to foster dialogue by providing training in restorative practices in communication and conflict resolution skills. And the question is, would you want to come out there to engage with that audience? I imagine that's a question that many cities will have following this conversation. And before you answer that question, to whomever from Olympia asked that question, we at Strong Cities would welcome more information on that training, because it seems very relevant to many cities, and we'd love to share that with other cities across the network. But Aziz, Maoz.
Awesome. A very easy answer. We might not be able to do it necessarily. We'll love to look into seeing if it's possible or not. But if we can't, the good news is Maoz and I are not the only two people who do it, and we would be more than happy to tell you who the people who can, and maybe some of them can do even better job than the two of us. So please stay in touch, and we will be happy to facilitate that. This is another thing that Maoz and I have been doing, is making sure that there are more people from Israel and Palestine who are coming to the US, to Europe, to I was last year in Africa as well. I'm in Asia right now, who are doing this work all over the world. And not just the two of us, but many others, and who can do as good as a job, and like I say, sometimes better. So we're happy to be in conversation and make sure there's a way to make it happen.
Yes, and we would also be very happy to learn about your plan, Olympia, and your project, because we're also here to learn and to be more knowledgeable.
So thank you.
You have a question about the May 8th and 9th. Where do people find information? Sorry, Eric, I took over
Okay. No, please,
asking
over you.
questions.
Ellison gonna send an email to everyone who participant or who are listed to this webinar. And Ellison, we need to make sure we have information there about the People Peace Summit in Jerusalem in coming May.
Okay, Maoz. We're also going to put your website link in the chat when Eric does his closing remarks. So everyone will have access to that straight away, but we will follow up and make sure we include event details as well. Thanks, Maoz.
Thank you.
And I had a question that now I just lost my my train of thought, but I do want to just flag that we will be doing our global summit in Toronto in December, where we would love to talk about having some aspect of that focus on your work, Aziz and Maoz, because I think, as you can tell from this 90-minute conversation, that there is a tremendous amount of interest in this. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. I remember my question now. So you've talked about knowing, having a growing network of individuals like yourselves who can engage with different audiences, different cities, if you're not able to. Have you come across cities in local governments, local leaders in the Palestinian territories or Israel that you think would want to be part of this conversation? And if so, please share and sort of how you think they can contribute to advancing this work.
Yeah, so the answer is yes with capital letters. Because we're speaking most of the time, I'm based in Israel, and most of the time I'm visiting communities, municipalities, and mayors here in Israel and in Palestine. And I think they can contribute and receive a lot by being part of a Strong City network. And I would love also to do a follow-up, just how we can give that, to explain them what's the benefits and how much they can contribute for your network. I think it can be a win, more than win-win. Like it's definitely something we would love to help facilitate.
Yeah, I agree. I can think definitely of a few that would be interested, and happy to help figure out how to make it happen.
Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, if we have more time, and I would love also to share a bit of our philosophy and theory of change. Okay, if it was
Wait, no, please. As you're doing that, and this can be sort of your final salvo, as it were, share that, and also if you could advise, if you were sitting in front of a mayor right now, and what would be the one piece of advice you would say to take concrete action tomorrow on everything we've talked about? What's the first thing you would recommend to a mayor that would have the most impact in their city? But theory of change first.
okay, yes. So Aziz will be we'll have time to think about how to answer your question. And both Aziz and I have been meeting with amazing people like yourself on a daily basis, and we've been learning a lot. And we also have a 5-step plan how to make a dream into a reality. And we have a dream. We are very proud to have a dream, a peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And so the first step is having a dream. The second step is to find our common ground and shared values. And we will not negotiate, dialoguing 70 Israelis and Palestinians about a year ago in Geneva, bereaved families from both sides, people who suffered the most during this conflict, and we were able to achieve those shared values of equality and dignity and security and safety. The third step is to building a coalition, partnership, because we cannot fulfill big dreams on our own. The first step is having a plan, a roadmap, because how would we reach our dream if we don't know how to get there? So we must build a roadmap. And fifth is the execution. We must execute, because we can have an amazing dream, great values, very powerful partners, and a very detailed plan. But if we want to execute, it's never going to happen. And speaking with you, we are not here just to be be host on these webinars. We really calling for a partnership, for a strong partnership in order to achieve our dream. And the roadmap is also contained 5 chapters. The first chapter is again going back to dream. We must dream. And dreams is the field where those who change the humanity and reality plays. It's not the political field and not the battlefield, it's the field of dreams. And we need to be very proud to have a dream. And if within Strong City Network, and if within your city, you will have a dream, a big dream, then you can change the future. And we want to change the future, but because we cannot allow for the future to be devastating and painful as the present is. So after we have a dream, we need to amplify our dream. We need to legitimize the dream. We need a policy change. So if you want your city to be secure and safe, don't just invest in police. Invest in dialogue. Invest in shared community projects. This is how you will achieve security and safety for all people. And the fifth is, but you're already there. For us, we just started, and we need to create a political will to make our policy into an action. So since you already got a political will, it can be much faster and easier for you to fulfill your dreams and make your cities and communities safer, that all are within equality and live dignity life. So that's the philosophy of change.
And I'll just add, kind of connecting to what Maoz here ended with, having a dream, connecting, building a coalition. If I was in front of a mayor today, I would say it's one of the mistakes perhaps happening is we think Israel and Palestine's out there, we are here. If you're in the US, you disconnected. I think the way we thinking, there's no disconnect. We are working Israel and Palestine, and we are working in the US, and we are working Europe, and we work in Asia and Africa, and saying this issue affects all of us, and this issue will not be solved unless all of us start working together. And so I don't see in some ways our work with you here or our work in other countries as separate from our work in Israel and Palestine. It is extremely connected. We need to work together to make this change, and we need you to see yourself as part of this coalition. We spend a lot of time in Israel and Palestine doing this work there, but we also invest a lot of time outside Israel and Palestine. And the bigger this tent is, and the more we realize that dream isn't just an Israeli-Palestinian dream, but really is a global dream. And the amplification of the voice must be an amplification all over, not only in Israel and Palestine. The legitimization, the policies, when we talk about changing policies, everyone here is from a